Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to High on History. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Liz. And today we have the end of the reign of Louis XIV. We've covered Versailles in all of its glory and who he was as a young man, and how the whole world literally revolved around him.
Yep.
And then some very significant things happened, and he fundamentally changed as a person, and as a result, all of Versailles changed, and also a lot of terrible things were happening in the world and in his world. Mm-hmm. And so we are going to cover, I'm going to start kind of with the psychology of who he became later in life. And then we're going to go into some detail in the upcoming episodes of some specific wars that I'm just going to gloss over. And then Jordan is covering, I have been waiting for this episode. In fact, I haven't looked into this at all because I really wanted to be surprised by this. I never looked it up. So Jordan is going into the Affair of the Poisons, which I know absolutely nothing about. Like, I specifically am super intrigued to hear about this. So, as we've covered before, Louis built Versailles essentially to make himself immortal.
Right.
And a lot of who he becomes really does stem from his early on fundamental belief that his glory is the glory of France and the glory of God.
Yep.
That's very much his worldview as he's young. And then a couple of things happen even early on. So he's very emotionally isolated.
Right.
He has made this world that is puppetry and performance, and everybody smiles because they must smile. Right. And he comes in time to recognize that there's very little in the way of sincerity.
Right, there's no authenticity.
There's no authenticity. And in many ways, he's alone. Even with his mistresses, who he adores, his early mistresses, there are parts of himself that he keeps very private.
Mm-hmm.
And as near as I can tell, there's only one person in the entire court of Versailles that this does not entirely apply to. Can you guess who it might be?
I'm going to assume that would be his late wife, Madame Maintenon.
No, his first wife, his queen.
Oh,
Maria Theresa. Yeah, Maria Theresa, his queen, have a fascinating relationship. And it's sad to me how little I could find other than just kind of broad overviews. And part of the reason is that Maria Theresa was not an ambitious woman.
Right.
She willingly gave up her claim to the throne of Spain initially in exchange for that dowry. Now, France claims that Spain never paid the dowry. And this is their reason, what do you call it when you forward a kind of a reason that isn't the full reason?
It was
the pretense.
It was the pretext for the Franco-Dutch War and all of that I covered in the last episode.
It's also right. So, now, in some versions of the story of Maria Theresa and Louis XIV, some have said, he essentially went to war for her claim to the Spanish throne. He also offered her something that was almost unheard of in Versailles.
Oh, yeah?
Privacy.
Oh, yeah.
And a bit of freedom. And she wasn't allowed to move out of Versailles. But he let her play with her own children. They weren't raised entirely by governesses. She raised them, she played with them. She had her own chapel, she had her own apartments. She was allowed to live her life as much unimpeded by the scheming court of Versailles as any queen could possibly be.
Oh, wow.
She was humble and sincere, and she was utterly devoted to Louis. She truly loved him. And he was surprisingly also devoted to her. Now, he had his mistresses, his infatuations, and his loves.
Right.
She was not as into sex as he was, and she, admitted that. She was frank about this.
Yeah.
He was super into having all sorts of lovely randy adventures.
I mean, we've talked about all of those lovely affairs and children.
She could not keep up.
Right.
And so she was fine, actually, with him off gallivanting and womanizing. No problem with it.
Right.
And they respected each other. And they conversed. And I wouldn't say that she in any way ran France, but they had meaningful conversations. They were companions and they were lifelong friends. She did have 6 children with him, only one of which survived childhood.
Yep.
And that becomes a sad story later because, he is not the person who succeeds Louis XIV.
Which I had talked about that in one of the previous episodes, how he had gotten measles, and that's how we end up with Louis XV.
Smallpox.
Oh yeah, it was smallpox.
Yeah. And there were several other family deaths that happened in very rapid succession right after that also. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
What really happens is that so after 23 years of marriage, Queen Maria Theresa passes away at the age of 44 on July 30th, 1683.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, she passed away from an abscess in her arm. I'm assuming it poisoned her blood.
Probably. Staph.
And then something very interesting happens.
Yeah.
Louis weeps.
Yeah?
In view of other people.
What? He actually cries? That's documented?
Yes. In fact, even his critics at the time made note that he wept real and sincere tears.
Wow.
He was legitimately devastated, and I think this very much explains everything that happens next.
I mean...
he becomes a completely changed man after 1683. Yeah.
Yeah.
For one thing, he begins to rely heavily on the counsel of a Jesuit priest, who I hope... Oh, wait. I did want to get to this. I did want to get to her funeral.
Yeah.
I had tried to look up what gifts he gave her, because all of the documentaries we watched made note that he gave her many gifts she wanted for nothing. He lavished her with love and attention,
right.
But I could not find out the nature of those gifts, and there was a weird reason for that. He simply wrote them all off as state expenses. They weren't itemized.
Spoils to the queen, state expenses.
State expenses. They were all just sort of written off, so there isn't good record of what he gave her. There is a record of a pearl, I want to call it the Pearl of Peregrine, and it came from the Spanish monarchy that she was born into, and became part of the French crown jewels. It was part of the dowry that was otherwise possibly not paid in full.
Never received.
We don't,
We don't actually know.
we don't know. It's not, because Spain was bankrupt. I mean, Spain was pretty legitimately bankrupt at the time.
Yeah.
They didn't really have the money
to pay for that dowry, but
it's also possible that they paid it and it was hunted.
Yeah, good point.
Anyway, moving on. One of history's continued and great mysteries.
Right.
But I do want to get to this funeral. So,
yeah.
I wanted to find out, were the funeral arrangements lavish? Like how was that funeral handled? Because I felt like it would reveal something
right
about what was going on. So the bells in Versailles tolled for hours. Her funeral procession was very long. It was solemn. People wrote specific songs called motets. Motets are songs that are written for royal funeraries. And essentially they're written for the person who died. And so she had a long procession of motets. It was a massive funeral.
A funeral fit for a queen.
A funeral fit for a queen. Interestingly enough, it didn't come with any of Louis's normal golden bombastic sort of style. It was a very solemn procession. It was extremely tasteful.
I mean, that sounds very much like Louis' style, though.
He honored her in death as she was in life, in absolution.
And because of their relationship and because of who he is, to have that many people writing songs on her death, and the way you describe the procession, I assume, with the bells tolls ringing for hours, that would mean that he is absolutely doing it in his grandiose, so beautiful, showy way.
Yes,
but in such
but it was
way.
Understated. It was very much in her style. Like he knew what he was doing, even
to
there.
Respect her and keep it solemn.
And I feel like it was born entirely of grief and love.
Yeah.
And so I think you can see that her death has this impact because really Versailles never comes to life again.
Right.
Once she is gone, he begins to rely heavily on the counsel of a Jesuit priest.
Yeah.
Whose name I do swear I wrote down, but Father de la Chaise.
Oh.
Yes. So Father de la Chaise is a Jesuit priest, and he comes into the picture, and Louis begins really to feel at this point in his life that perhaps his zest for trying to reach for glory has become too much, and perhaps God is upset with him.
I mean...
And so he basically begins confessing to this Jesuit priest, and also it is at this time that he notices the governess of his illegitimate children, Madame Maintenon. And she is not ambitious. And this, I think, is interesting because he's really looking for someone who is in spirit as Maria Theresa was. So not ambitious, not lusting for power. Someone who will talk to him as he is, who treats him like a person and not a king. And Madame Maintenon, by all accounts, does exactly this.
Yeah.
She sees that underneath, and Father Lachaise sees this too, that underneath all the glitz and glamour, Louis has begun to feel an amazing amount of guilt.
Yeah.
He's now overcompensating. He becomes aware his people are starving. There's a famine. I don't know if I remembered to write down the years of the famine. I want to say it's like 1688 to. Oh, shoot. I did not. I'll bet they're in my notes in my phone, but I forgot to write down the dates.
Oops.
But there's a famine around 1688. I know that's. Let's see here. 60. Oh, yeah. Okay, yep, it is 1688. Okay, I do need to cover what happens in 1685. So, just 2 years after Maria Theresa has died. Mm-hmm. And Madame Maintenon is in the picture.
Yep.
Louis has turned so deeply to his Catholic faith.
Yeah.
That he's begun to believe that he has sinned against God and God is punishing him. And he revokes the edicts of Nantes, which is one of his edicts.
Right.
And it had allowed a certain freedom of religion for Protestants.
Yeah.
In France.
It was a big deal.
It was a big deal. He revokes it and starts expelling all the Huguenots out of France. And he gets more deeply Catholic. He basically very much makes France now zealously, passionately Catholic. But it's kind of a dark Catholicism. This isn't Rome of the Vanities in the 1400s. You know, this is a very
this is a purge of the Huguenots out of
it's
France.
Also it's also a Catholicism that really believes that God is punishing them, and they can look all around and see that God is punishing them. He has sent so many soldiers to war that entire villages have lost their working sons to work the farms, and so famines are ensuing. And in 1688, there is a famine that is basically caused from having run out of men to work the farms.
Wow.
So the wars are costing him in ways he didn't see.
Right.
And he says at some point in his life, actually he says several times towards the very end of his life, I have been much too fond of war.
Yeah.
He really begins to understand that his expansionist glory of the French Empire attitude of his early years and his early victories were a hubris.
Yeah.
But now he's stuck, and there are, he is a massive nation. At this point, he is massive. And even as he loses wars later in his life, which does cost him fairly significant amounts of territory, not as much as will be lost later.
Right.
But it does. It costs him. He has to make concessions. It really feels to him, and this is important to his psychology, he is very Catholic, so to him, he feels like God is ticked at me.
Yeah.
I have failed to bring glory to his name. And, Versailles becomes, essentially a chapel. It's a very different place. The theater stops, the music stops.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of tellings of this that really sort of blame it on Madame Maintenon, but I would suggest that after Maria Theresa died, Louis searched for what felt authentic and meaningful and real to him, and for him, he found that in a woman who was as humble as Maria Theresa was.
Mm-hmm.
And
she was a devoted woman to Catholicism, too.
She was, and he also found comfort in that Catholicism. And that follows him all the way to his grave.
Yeah.
So, he did, as he knew he was dying, he brings Louis XV, who is just a very small child at the time.
No more than like 6 or 7 at this point.
I think he was even a little younger. I barely older than a toddler, so like 4, 5, 6.
Well, he was 2 when his entire family was wiped out by the measles.
The
by
smallpox.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and just for the succession here. So, Louis has one son, the Dauphin, who survives into adulthood. However, he dies of smallpox. And right after he dies of smallpox, his son and his son's wife and their two small boys also die. And that leaves only one great grandson, the future Louis XV. So when he's 4 or 5, he's brought to the court of Versailles. Louis XIV pins all his hopes on this little kid. This kid is
he becomes the Sun King, pretty much.
Well, he's supposed to.
Yep.
But now Louis is a different person.
Yeah.
And he no longer has this hubris. He sees himself as human. Gangrene is eating through his body. He's been through numerous painful surgeries. And he gets up every day. This is something that is remarkable about him as a person. He would have surgery one day and make sure that he was in the council chambers the next morning. Like, he did not miss meetings. He was a working king.
There was one surgery he had for his fistula.
Yeah.
That he literally, within 4 hours of having the surgery, he was riding a horse, they say.
Yeah. He was a remarkably hard worker.
Yeah.
And I find, and that continued all the way up until just days before he died. He would be brought out to the window of his balcony so he could see and address his people. It's very important to him that they knew that he was there keeping things good.
Right.
To the very end. But he does bring Louis into court, Louis XV. And I wrote down some of these things that he said. He not only said, "I have loved war too much," which I believe he actually admitted sort of as a confession to his nobles. He told Louis XV specifically, "Try to ease the burdens of your people, which I have not done enough." He really began to understand the suffering of his people. There was a winter, the winter of 1709, was so cold that the people were eating bark and grass. I mean, the famine, the amount of starvation in France, because these wars that he fought broke France. They bled France dry. If we want to know how we get to the revolution, know that Louis XV broke France. Versailles, all that glorious stuff he did.
Louis XIV broke France.
Louis XIV broke France.
Yeah.
His hubris. And he was, in fact, penitent and knew that by the end of his life. He was
mournful about it.
Horrendously. Yeah, he was horrendously aware of this by the end of his life.
Yeah.
He could have been no one but who he became. He could have done no different than what he did in so many ways. Right. He tried to rule wisely and well, and, insofar as he put competent people in office instead of nobles,
right.
Insofar as he kept rebellion from devastating his reign and his people, he did some remarkable things.
But he just loved war a little too much.
And his own glory. He did have that mistaken idea. And it's weird because even in the end, he still believed that God was punishing France to punish him.
Yeah.
He never lets go of the idea, not fully, that he is God's chosen representative of the French people on earth, and that he has failed God, and God is punishing him by punishing his people.
Right.
Which, is still a fair amount of unexamined hubris, but he feels deep mourning guilt for this by the end, and then the gangrene gets him, and he died on September 1st, 1715. And so that is the end of my segment.
Woo! Alright, so we finally get to the affair of the poisons. So we're back with Madame Montespan, which was his glamour and glitz mistress. She was the unofficial queen of France.
Yeah, she's the second mistress, right? The
Yes.
second official mistress, yes?
Yes, technically.
Yes.
Technically.
She had way more power, if I've got
She
this
was
right.
the one who, if you go back 2 episodes, I believe it is, where I'm talking about her at the end of my segment, where she's got the five bedrooms right next to Louis. She's his gatekeeper. Everybody's finding themselves in her private chambers, hanging out with her. She's part of the reason why they ended up going to war for the Franco-Dutch War and the Anglo-Dutch War and everything I talked about last episode.
Now, was
because
that
she manipulated all of the governors and people.
Right, now, and she was Catholic, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So now we're here with the affair of the poisons. Now, how is Madame Montespan connected to this event? Well, first and foremost, the affair of the poisons was an exposition. It was exposing an underground or an underworld of poisoners, fortune tellers, witchcraft. We're talking about black magic practitioners, and these sorcerers worked for the nobles.
Oh,
so this is a hidden underground in the court of Versailles. And so this was a major turn of events for witchcraft and a scandal for witch hunting in Versailles itself.
Oh my gosh.
1677 is when all of this goes down.
Okay.
So it actually begins with the arrest and the execution of Marie Madeleine Margaret d'Aubry, the Marquise de Brinvilliers, in 1676. And she was accused of poisoning her father and 2 brothers to get them out of the way so she can inherit their lands.
Okay.
And so, because of that being exposed, that she actually did poison them because everybody just kind of dropped dead at the same time and then she's left alive.
Right.
So, because of that happened, it actually ended up opening a vast network of criminal underground to end up exposing Catherine Deschay's monovision, known as La Vision. She was a fortune teller, self-proclaimed sorceress, and she was the main suspect and ringleader. And she ended up confessing to selling love potions, hosting black masses to cast spells and help clients achieve their goals. So, like, she through torture, she ended up confessing all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, after the first girl, Marie Madeleine was confessed to her poisoning. That exposed Catherine. Catherine gets tortured and then confesses, and she ends up implicating so many members of nobility from buying from her. From buying love potions, being part of black masses, children's sacrifice was even part of all of this. Like, oh god, it gets...
But they're all confessing under torture.
Of course. But, I mean, it's a good tale. This should have almost been the Halloween special as well. Okay, so as many nobles were noted, one of the most important people in Louis's personal circle was also implicated. And that was Madame Montespan. When she was implicated, that flipped Louis's world upside down. She ended up being accused of buying love potions, poisoning people to eliminate rivals, including the Duchess of Fontaines, and she also participated in black masses as well as the children sacrifices to ensure the king's affection. Which, I mean, okay, let's take a step back from, like, the facts of all of this for just a second, and, like, imagine, like, her absolute power. That totally, like, if you're scared of witches and living back then, that would make so much sense. How this woman all of a sudden just snatches all this power. Of course she's practicing black magic.
Yeah. So there is no doubt
Yeah.
that women have been the scapegoats for all sorts of political intrigues. Moving the right women out of other people's way is a lifelong passion, and among the Europeans, accusing women of witchcraft, torturing them to get them to confess to even more witchcraft was just like such a done thing.
So regular. So, because Montespan was implicated, this threatened so much scandal for the monarchy. It would tarnish the reputation of Montespan. It also would cause Louis to halt all public trials regarding this at that point. Because, heaven forbid, Miss Montespan has to go on trial.
Oh, so the king is just like, all right, we are done with this nonsense.
And it was all dealt in secret at that point. So Montespan was never officially prosecuted, but she fell from favor. And now if you guys end up going back to watch the last 2 episodes, or 2 episodes ago, where I talked about how he, like, told her she's gone, he took over her estates. And that's when she totally fell from favor. But it caused a permanent rift in the relationship, and eventually she would be exiled from court in 1691. She ended up staying in court after the affair of the poisons to kind of be like, hey, I still am with you.
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. We're going to pretend none of this happened and you were not implicated, and I trust you. That's pretty much the only reason why she was allowed to stay at court, is Louis was saving face. And she ended up getting to stay because also he loved their children. She was a good mom. Like, so also because of the children.
And he knew that this was all nonsense.
And also, I actually do think I do believe he believed it because of the way he reacted and clutched to Catholicism and went so inward. I do believe he actually believed it. Because when she died, he refused to allow the children to wear black. He didn't honor her funeral. He didn't attend.
Oh, so he did believe it.
Oh, abso-fucking-lutely. And the
now,
only
it is possible that at least part of this is true, because it's quite likely that she did, in fact, have people poisoned. Is that not true?
I absolutely believe that. There was a lot of random mysterious deaths. She had her hands in a lot of government affairs as well. So, like, yeah, I would absolutely believe that she poisoned or hired people to poison people. I mean,
even if the witchcraft charge, which is always the nonsense that it is, doesn't hold any water, which Louis was a devout Catholic even before the switch. He himself was a practicing, thoughtful Catholic in his own way,
and witchcraft's a sin.
And witchcraft's a sin. It's certainly not a sin. Like, somehow he forgave himself all of his affairs and debauchery in the beginning. I forgot to mention. Oh, well, I guess we'll get there. But, like, he married Maintenon. He did not have an affair with her.
No, no. Spoilers on that one, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But, yeah. So, part of the reason why, other than, like, okay, why she got banished, she had a volatile temper. She started losing her banana. She went off her rocker. She started becoming desperate. She tried to maintain she got angry and jealous over his switching of affection toward Lady Maintenon because of his personal spiritual awakening. So that's what made him end up banishing her. He had his come to God moment. He started being interested in his governess. She was losing her gourd because, I mean, I wouldn't trust her either if she's poisoning people around me and then just got implemented as a witch. Like,
right.
putting
Right.
myself in that time period.
Even if he didn't believe it, he couldn't be seen
truly supporting it.
Yeah. Being that close to it. I do kind of like that he did let her stay at court. It's possible she would have been in danger if he'd expelled her.
At least in that first 10 years, I absolutely agree with you. She would have totally been in danger.
Yeah.
So eventually, in 1691, she did get to retire to a convent, Fields de Saint Joseph Convent, and that was where she was collecting, taking waters on her death. She was taking in like the famous waters of healing. They were supposed to be some sort of like thermal aromatherapy or like mineral bath. She had some unspecific heart condition that ended up causing her death, which is why she was at these like this convent hot spring. Man, I want to retire where she died at. Like, this place got like thermal hot springs.
This was a cushy convent.
She ended up dying on May 27th in 1707, so just a few years before Louis himself passed away. She was 66 years old when she passed. And I did mention that Louis had banned their children from wearing the colors of mourning. But while she was alive before her death, after she had been exiled to the convent, they were allowed to maintain communication with her. They wrote letters. They were able to talk to their mother. Like, even though she was banished and no longer allowed to be seen at court, and even though he was like, you ain't mourning your mom,
he didn't cut them off completely.
You can talk to her.
See, there's a lot of things
about so many kings that did that too, though. Cut them off, and that was beautiful.
Right. I was just about to say there's so many things about Louis. He too does not seem like a bad guy. He seems like a man who genuinely wants to be a good man.
I mean, he let his children communicate with their mother after she committed a major sin against the crown. I don't. That by all means. Poisoning somebody in the court, that alone is a threat to the crown.
That is the part that also makes me wonder whether he actually believed if he believed that she was a witch, why would he not cut off his children from all contact with her? Why not have her executed? It was
I think there was a part of him that maybe for the sake of the children wanted them to be able to communicate. Maybe he didn't fully believe it, but still because of the holy shit, this was a woman I loved. I can't do this anymore, and like freak meltdown.
I'm sure
but
that
at the same time,
too.
be like, look, that's your mom. Just because I can't talk to her, doesn't mean I can't let you talk to her. Just because I don't trust her doesn't mean she's gonna poison you kids.
Right. So, no, he knows who she is. So he's also a rational man. Like, I don't think that Louis was explicitly superstitious. Not as a Catholic.
He didn't really seem like it.
No. So, anyway, his behavior, considering that he's king, was entirely rational there, I think. And honestly, it's to his credit that he put up with her behavior for as long as he did. Because she really...
10 years of her being
just
off his gourd at him. So now we get to the Marquise de Montanan. This woman, I kind of initially didn't really like when I first learned about her, but she actually kind of grew on me. She was a woman who actually understood Louis. She was a woman who also came from very, very humble beginnings. She was born Francois de Aubergine in a prison.
Oh, wow, poor thing.
Yeah, in Niort, France, on November 27th, which happy early birthday to her, in 1635. Her family was incarcerated for debt. She was shipped off as part of the slave trade to the West Indies as a child with her family to pay back the debt.
Oh, poor thing.
And then she was also reduced to begging when she ended up getting to come back to France after her family was indentured and paid back their debt. So, and that was in 1647. And then she was eventually taken in by her paternal aunt and uncle, after she had been a street urchin for a little while. And that was also her coming back from the West Indies and her parents dying. So she lost her mom and dad when they came back from the West Indies. She was a street urchin for a little while, and then her biological paternal, so that would be her father's aunt and brother and sister, took her in. And in order to avoid being shipped off to a convent, she decided to marry Paul Saccharin. He was a poet and a satirist. So he apparently was a funny man. And he was 25 years her senior, so he was considerably older than her. But because of his status of being an actor, an entertainer, the poet, the satirist, he was a performer. So that allowed her access to high society. And her central figure allowed her also, or her husband's centralized figure also allowed her access to like literary salons. So that was like allowing her to get access to knowledge and books. So it made her really smart. She had wit and intelligence because she was constantly being played with by her husband. Because they're in the high society and she's his wife, people are fucking with her too, for the lack of a better phrase. So she's got to be witty and smart to keep up the show with him, so to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
she really gets quite the education in life.
Yeah, she becomes somebody. She's actually quite, and this is why I said I initially didn't like her, and then like finding where she came from and how she grew into the woman she was. Oh, you go girl! Hero status all of a sudden. So she ended up cultivating some heavy influences with some heavy friendships with some very influential people. I said that backwards. So when her husband ended up passing away in 1660, so they didn't have a very long marriage. They married in 1652 and he dies in 1660.
Oh, sad.
But in that time, she climbs that social scale.
She makes friends.
Yeah.
In, society.
Now, because he was a poet and a playwright, there was no money in that. So she was left broke. House was taken from her because obviously she can't pay to upkeep it. And she becomes pretty much a couch surfer. She lives off the charity of friends. And then Madame Maintenon was introduced to Madame de Montespan by a friend of Maintenon who is the cousin of Marquise d'Albret, which was the original governor, and then she was introduced to Montespan to be a secret governess. So when they were originally
a secret governess.
Oh yeah. So okay, and originally in 1666, Montespan was still married. Remember that from two episodes ago?
Yeah.
So she got knocked up. But at that point, her husband was still in court. But they were not together because she was obviously with the king.
Right.
But when she got knocked up, she had to go off fighting, so they hired Maintenon to be the secret governess. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So, Maintenon and Louis had no children together. And obviously that's how Louis and Maintenon met. She was a governess.
Right. She was the governess to Montespan's children.
Yep. So her predecessor's children, which is kind of funny because That's kind of a common thing I've noticed with a lot of kings and like a lot of things that I've looked into about royalty is they go for their governess. They always go for the babysitter.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is not just a joke. That is literally a historical like stereotype.
Oh wow, interesting. It's a trope.
Yeah, it's a trope. There we go. So, between Montanon and Louis, there was a lot of companionship, spiritual guidance. It was not a public relationship either because of her low status.
Right.
I mean, there was no title, there was no ability, there was nothing to her. She was born in a prison. How dare the king fall in love with that? Lack of a better word, trash. That woman had no status.
Except that, of course,
he gives her a piece of land, making her Marquise. Marquise de Montanon. And that's how she ended up having her title, is because of the children. They needed their private home. So she was introduced to court kind of as a friend, and then somehow all of a sudden got the title. Speak that into the world. And then after the divorce, after Louis was like, hey, you get out of here for acting a fool, Mr. Montespan, he then
they went here for married.
Montespan was married though, and when Louis
right.
kicked her husband out of court and
right.
forced the divorce between the two of them, that's when the children became present in court.
I see.
So they didn't actually begin their real romantic relationship until after the death of the queen, which is when they got married. But they had actually already kind of been seeing each other, relying on each other, he confiding in her, growing close to her as early as 1674. So Maria Theresa was still alive when they had started their romance. And it was because of the affair of the poisons. She was a pious woman, and he wanted to spend time with his children and freak out about their mother. And she was there comforting him, consoling with the Bible, playing with the children, being the motherly figure and the pious, saintly woman that she actually was, because she was of humble origin and given an opportunity to rise to grace.
And educated and unambitious. I think other than Maria Theresa, she was the only other person in the entire court who was just authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And they actually, he trusted her so much and sought her opinion on spiritual matters as well as matters of the court so regularly, he began holding meetings with his ministers in her apartments.
Wow. Yeah. There's a statement. I always liked this. Louis was no misogynist.
No, he was very open with allowing his mistresses to have power in court.
Yeah.
Like, his queen
He wasn't just a womanizer, he was also a feminist.
Like, his queen didn't want that role. And what does Montespan do? Take the role of the queen and do what she's supposed to do with it. Mm-hmm. She is the belle of the ball, while the queen got to be her quiet little self in her corner reading her book, crocheting, knitting, doing whatever the heck.
Playing with her own children. For what time she had them. She also was deeply in mourning much of the time. She lost most of her children. One son.
After the other. I mean, so...
Well, one son lived out of 6.
Yeah. So, I mean, the queen, So it makes sense why he had her playing the role of the queen, so to say, by holding the meetings in the court, showing that she's moving up in his eyes.
Right.
Now, she herself encouraged Louis to be more pious. She encouraged him to sober up, be more virtuous in later life, and... on October 9th...
You switched from Montespan to Montanon.
Yep, I'm back to Montanon. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't remember where I was going with Montespan. I think I was done with that thought.
Yes.
Okay, back to Montanon. So Montanon had encouraged him to be more pious. She encouraged him to sober up, and that's where we get the psychology that we were talking about earlier, the more darker Catholic side of Louis.
Yeah. He really begins to try to atone for his sin. He begins to be penitent in a legitimate way. And Montanon, and to a lesser degree, Father de la Chaise, have a huge impact on that.
Absolutely. And then Maria Theresa died on July 30th of 1683, just like you said. And Louis marries Marquis de Montanon on October 9th, maybe the 10th, in a secret and private ceremony that same year.
Oh, wow.
So she dies in July, they're married in October. Same year.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, there was no waiting. Now, he, like you said, he mourned her, he did all of that. She married him, they got married.
Actually, no, this makes sense. Like, okay, so there might be some people out there whose initial reaction to that is like, oh, wow, oh my god, that is, like, harsh.
Right.
No, it's not. And I'm going to explain why. First of all, in grief, people do amazing things.
Oh, absolutely.
Secondly, this is a older, wiser, different Louis. He had come to respect Montanon for who she was as a person. He knew by then who his partner needed to be. They had a loving relationship for the rest of his days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
she was very unceremoniously ushered out of court after his death, but
it was a shame.
It really was a shame because they genuinely loved each other.
Mm-hmm. Now, Montanon could never, ever be recognized as queen, which is why they had their secret and private ceremony. So she would never be able to share any of the privileges, even though she was respected at court while he was alive. And for the most part, she was respected in general. Like, even though
because she was clever and intelligent and good to people.
She was kind-natured and funny and just all around. I would have liked her. I think I would have. And so she ended up causing the breaks of customs. So having a break in custom of their marriage. So they had a morganic marriage. Instead of an authorized Orthodox Catholic wedding that is recognized that would allow her to take the title,
right?
They had what was called a morganic wedding.
That's a nighttime wedding.
Yep, basically. It is technically illegal but not recognized. Personal, spiritual love bonding is pretty much how it's described.
Yeah. We got a priest to do something he ain't supposed to do because he knows this is a good time to do it. Yeah.
Yep, pretty much.
Those are the best.
Yeah. So now she did end up surviving Louis and got to retire to Mansion Royal de Saint Louis. That was a school that she founded to educate impoverished young women within nobility.
Yeah, it was in my notes and I skimmed over that she started a woman's school.
Yeah, she founded that in 1686. So just a few years after their marriage, so that was something he allowed her to do, to just kind of have a hobby, and I think that's fantastic. She's a governess at her whole life at that point. Like, Louis' children are grown. She's watched all the other children grow over the years, too, because he had dozens. Like, you can see the video 3 or 4 videos back of the lineage of legitimate and illegitimate children that
there
Louis
were a
had.
lot of them.
Dozens of them. And she was there for most of their growing up. She focused on raising Montespans. But she knew all of their brothers and sisters. Why wouldn't she?
Certainly.
So, having all her children, for the lack of never having any of her own, she got to have a school, and I think that's so beautiful that he allowed her to continue on with something that she cared about. And this was a female education. So these girls were trained in etiquette, dancing, crafts. This was an elegant finishing school for these young ladies. And she did end up dying in her school on April 15th in 1719. The school ended up closing during the French Revolution in 1793, and I would actually like to come back to what causes the school to close in 1793 when we get to that point.
I am putting to do so. Put a
we are
pin
putting
in that.
a pin in this. And today, the building is now home to a military academy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure she wouldn't love that.
I'm sure she wouldn't either. And just to kind of clarify, I had this card in the wrong spot. I do apologize. The way she ended up becoming Marquise de Maintenon, she was bestowed her title and estate as a token of appreciation in 1675. And the house and estate was purchased by Louis and gifted to her.
So well before their marriage.
Well before their marriage. Pretty much as soon as she became governess. Much as soon as
because he needed her to have a notable title to be the court governess. That makes perfect sense.
And that's why I said that card was out of place, and I do apologize for that. And with that being said, thank you, Green Health, for supplying our stash of the day, and we appreciate it. That was a wrap. Tune in 2 weeks where I will be covering the 9-Year War. And you're going to be taking over one of the colonies. Are you taking over the Americas, or are you taking on the African West Indies colonies first with the 9-Year War?
I still haven't decided. They're both very, very important stories to tell. I'm tempted to start with the African colonies because I feel like in the time of Louis XIV, certainly the history there of the French colonizing parts of Africa is that's been going on for much longer.
Yeah.
And it is, more attached, in terms of continent space than the United,
over
the New World, North America.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so next week I'll be covering very likely the French colonization of Africa and the consequences therein. So this is super important to the long ongoing story. European colonization comes back to bite Europe in such in such devastating ways, and we're going to show you how that happened. In fact, European colonization, they always argue like it was some grand thing, this manifest destiny. But it came back to absolutely destroy the very societies that invented the notion.
Oh, when I get to the French and Indian War, or also known as the 7-Year War for Europe and the rest of the world, it's gonna show how the impact of the American colonies in Europe, because it causes a global war.
Yeah. European expansionism was a wreck of an idea in all the places they expanded to, and also a wreck of an idea in Europe. It was a bad idea. We're going to spend a great deal of time showing exactly why that turned out to be. And I was sort of surprised by this. There was more boomerang there than I had realized before I started this journey. So join us for this interesting exploration. Thank you so much, and bye.